Good morning, good morning. Very good. Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Seeley, Vice President of the Middle East Institute, and I'm pleased to welcome you all here today for this very important conversation with Palestinian Ambassador Husam Zomlot. We're co-hosting today's event with the Foundation for Middle East Peace, which works to promote a just solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through education and advocacy. And I just want to say that their role is more important than ever before today in light of the daily injustices endorsed by the Trump administration against the Palestinian people. And just today, we learned that the administration has ordered the shutdown of USAID offices and the firing of staff in the West Bank. Apparently, by the end of 2019, there will be no more USAID support in key economic areas of assistance, such as water, education, health, and infrastructure development, all of which will have a significant impact on the lives of ordinary Palestinians. Now, this follows many other, in my view, problematic policies, including defunding UNRWA and the closure of the PLO offices in DC last fall. In fact, it was just 16 months ago here at MEI on this stage that we hosted Ambassador Zomlot in a conversation with President Paul Salem. And he was at the time the newly assigned Palestinian representative to Washington, and we were all very excited to welcome someone with his vision, his talent, and his skills. We felt that there was so much that he could accomplish. Hello, Husam, welcome. But then in October 2018, the Trump administration took the unprecedented step of of closing the offices and of revoking Husam's visa, and he and his family had to unceremoniously leave the country. He is currently the Palestinian ambassador to the UK. He was supposed to travel to the US last week to give several talks, including here at MEI, but was unable to do so for reasons that he will explain. But he has graciously agreed to join us by Skype. So thank you so much, Husam, for joining us today and talking about these very important issues. FMEP President Lara Friedman will be moderating this discussion and helping us to understand the impact of these policies on the future of the peace process. Lara brings more than 25 years of experience working in Middle East policy with a particular expertise on the Arab-Israeli conflict. So thank you, Lara, for leading today's discussion. And before I hand it over to Lara, just a few other notes. I'd like to thank George Salem and the George and Rhonda Salem Family Foundation for their gracious support of this event and MEI's programming on Palestine-Israel. So please, everybody, turn off your phones. If you are tweeting, we are tweeting with the hashtag MEI Palestine. So Lara, please join.
So thank you, Kate, and thank you, MEI. And yes, please turn off your cell phones. I should let people know that this is not live streaming because we have Husam remotely here. We're going to have to be posting the video later, but this will be posted later. So if you do decide to ask questions during the Q&A, you will be recorded, so be aware. Beyond that, so the structure today is that Husam is going to give some remarks. When he is done, I may engage him in a little back and forth conversation, but we're going to try to open it up pretty quickly to Q&A from the audience and make this a discussion. There's a lot of issues to discuss, starting with why Husam is not with us here today, what the status of the Palestinian relationship with the Trump administration, the US, is, and where things are going. So let me hand that off now. Husam, if you are ready. We are ready to hear from you, and then we will begin the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lara, and good morning, everybody, and thanks to Kate. I miss you, Kate. I miss the Middle East Institute, the many friends I wish I can see, but I was told that many of those who we worked with are in presence. I also would like to tell you how much we missed working in Washington, and as much as you had that feeling of possibilities and opportunities, we also do. I mean, the short period of time I spent in Washington, it wasn't that short, a year and a half actually, have really shown us the potential in the US, the many transformational changes. And this is a situation where we need to talk about today. So thanks to you, Kate, thanks to Lara and the Foundation for Middle East Peace, thanks to all the organizations that have helped me return to the Middle East Institute today. I remember my last speech was at the Middle East Institute, was just a few days after the recognition of Jerusalem. And I remember very well, fondly warning from the consequences of that decision. Today, where we are, and it is absolutely pleasure that we take this opportunity to discuss and converse about the situation. And having said all that, I really look forward to seeing you all in person sometime soon. But sadly, a year since I was in Washington, I am unable to return. The Trump administration has since then been engaged in a relentless campaign to de-recognize and delegitimize the Palestinian people and leadership. It has reached a point where we need to pause after legal advice before traveling to the US to accept your invitation. That tells you how severe the state of affairs, how much it has regressed in the official sense between us and the US. And this is exactly why I had to speak to you today from London. And this may come up in the discussion, but there is an array of laws being passed harshly in the Congress that we are assessing as we speak. But me not being able to actually be with you in person sums up everything that is wrong right now with the Trump administration's approach. It tells you more clearly than anything I can say the state of the US-Palestinian relations. But we will get there. My departure last time was unwanted, definitely unwanted, Kate, though not unexpected. I mean, even in my previous remarks at the Middle East Institute, I did say that one of the things we are expecting is the closure of the Palestinian Mission in Washington. And when I last spoke to you, I did also, after President Trump had announced that he would move the US Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. That caused a breakdown in the US-Palestinian relations, exactly as we tried to warn in the Middle East Institute and everywhere in the US of the consequences of such a decision. Things since then have not improved. And yet, as the title of my talk suggests, things are also not hopeless, my friends. In some ways, in fact, the Trump administration has opened up possibilities for all of us. By tampering with the framework, it has also provoked a much wider discussions about international relations generally and the Palestinian-Israeli question specifically. And this presents us with opportunities. Some of these I want to discuss with you today. And again, thank you for giving me this opportunity and inviting me to address such distinguished audience. And my friends, you will have learned and heard, like we have, that the Trump administration's so-called ultimate deal is in the works somewhere. We don't know whether it is imminent or whether it will even see the light of the day. We have no clue whatsoever. What we know is that this administration or administration officials have promised in January that the details would follow Israel's general elections. I was reading this morning a statement by Jared Kushner that it might be in June. That election has just finished, and the victor of that election promised to annex more occupied land, as you all have followed. Neither of all this really bodes well for us Palestinians. But both serve the very useful function of clarifying the situation for all of us, all that is happening now. We do not know the content of the ultimate deal whatsoever. We can, of course, cross the T's and dot the I's based on statements that have been made, based on steps that have been taken, and based on our previous experience and engagement with the Trump administration itself, with the officials themselves. And if we do that, and given that we were not consulted whatsoever in this whole process, it seems that Israel appears to have been the major party, if not the only actually party that has been consulted. Netanyahu is the only leader that has been consulted, not us, not international law, not international partner. And all that we have been gathering so far points in that direction. And in fact, it could be argued that much that we have heard appears specifically intended to aid Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of the last week's elections. I mean, it's not even a matter of American-Israeli relationship. It's much more now a matter of the Trump-Netanyahu relationship and all these personal favors and helping each other in time of need. We are asking, is it just a coincidence, for instance, that during the election campaign in Israel, the Trump administration would recognize Israel's illegal annexation of the Golan Heights? Certainly, whatever plan there is has very little, if any, to do with us, the Palestinians. In fact, right from the beginning of this administration, it quickly became clear to the Palestinian side that this administration was not ready or even willing to listen to us altogether. This is partly the reason why the Palestinian leadership under President Mahmoud Abbas made the strategic decision in December 2017 to not engage with this administration, to adopt a no-contact policy with this administration. And let me explain, my friends, how we reached that decision. A decision, and let me assure you, that was not made lightly in any way or form. We have gone through 3 phases with the Trump administration. The first phase I may call the unknown, the unpredictable, which lasted primarily from the time of the election of President Trump in November 2016 all the way to March. These 4 or 5 months were a time of total confusion in our side. And I was still in Ramallah, and I was still part of the Palestinian discussion there. And there was absolutely no contact, no attempt by the new administration, the team of the president, to reach out to the Palestinians to an extent that some started being ahead of themselves, some analysts, and saying that this administration has already adopted a no-contact policy with the Palestinians before they even started. And during that period, there was a lot of skepticism in Palestine. A lot of skepticism, especially after the early appointments to senior positions that has to do with us directly and the Middle East in general. It did not promise much. And we know the background, we know the CVs of many of them. But already, and as you know, some of the new senior officials were advocating stuff that would go against the long-held U.S. policy. But that period of the unknown, if I may call it, ended in March 2017 and started a new phase with the Trump administration, which is a phase of engagement. The call came from President Trump to President Abbas, and that ended the uncertainty and the speculations and the discussion. And in that call, President Trump invited our president to the White House, to Washington, and promised to intervene for the sake of a final agreement and a lasting peace. This initiated what we might call the second phase of our experience with the Trump administration, and immediately we took a decision to pursue full engagement at the highest level with the Trump administration. And the purpose from our side for that engagement at the highest level was to start on the right foot. We wanted to start on the right foot with the new administration. Our main concern was to ensure that the Trump administration would reaffirm support for the long-held U.S. policy. That's number one priority. The commitments, the pledges since Madrid that was U.S.-led, U.S. initiated, U.S. sponsored, all the way through to the Oslo process. During this phase, there were 4 direct meetings between President Abbas and President Trump in a few months, actually. They met in May, only in May 2017 in Washington on the 3rd of May, if you remember. And I was tasked only a few weeks after I arrived to prepare for that very important visit and meeting by President Abbas to President Trump and his team. Then they met in Riyadh also in May, and they met in Bethlehem when President Trump visited us with his team to Bethlehem. The 2 presidents met in September in New York at the fringe of the UN General Assembly. I think that was such an intense period of engagement at the highest level, and I think it's unprecedented between the US and many other countries. Maybe we will be one of the few who had such an intense and repeated official meetings at the highest level in such a short span of time. And the engagement also continued, not only at the presidential level, but also at the team's level. I mean, I myself was sent to the US shortly after that call in March for the prime objective of working with this administration and engaging this administration and trying to make sure that this administration will keep its commitments and promises. Our teams, the US team and the Palestinian team, must have met more than 30 times. We lost count, actually, both in Washington and in Palestine. We met the Trump team more than 30 times. We engaged. We did our absolute best to ensure that the US would stay committed to its previous positions and to international resolutions that the US actually co-sponsored and voted for, like Resolution 242, 338, and what have you, all the way to the last resolution, 2334, that was passed in December 2016. It was not to be. It was absolutely not to be. The dice had been loaded. This administration's mind was already made up from day one, by the way, long before our engagement. In November, only a few months later, in November 2017, I was to learn from the State Department that the Trump administration would close the PLO mission to the US. Right, by the way, at the height of the engagement, if you may, right at the time of the niceties, right at the middle of our positive engagement, if you may, right in the middle of the honeymoon, came that phone call from the State Department to inform me that the Trump administration would close the PLO mission to the US. And talking about wanting to engage the Palestinians, I mean, if you have a Palestinian diplomatic mission and you have a Palestinian ambassador who is directly linked to the president and is capable to convey the messages, and then you want to close that off, then I'm not so sure how much we can talk about engagements, listening to the other, wanting to engage the other. In December, as you all know, President Trump announced that he was moving the US embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, recognizing Israel's claim to the city as its capital, and subsumming the US consulate to Palestine within it. It means the US embassy to Israel. And by the way, this is such a severe act. Closing our office in Washington, our mission in Washington, was absolutely severe. We took it as a strategic move to de-recognize the people of Palestine and the leadership of Palestine, but not less severe, not less transformative, negatively so, was the Consulate General. I mean, this Consulate General of the US was established in 1844 to serve as the key point of contact between the US and Palestine, the people, the governments. And now they have relocated this Consulate General, historic and significant, and address to our bilateral relationship, to be part of the US embassy to Israel, itself illegally relocated to Jerusalem, and now it's called Palestinian Affairs Unit. I mean, the intention is absolutely clear. We are now only an internal matter of Israel, only an internal issue, an internal affair within Israel. And it was clear to us that our engagement had no success whatsoever. So, my friends, we took the decision to stop engaging this administration. This administration doing unilateral, illegal acts on its own is something, and claiming that they are doing it while engaging us is something else. And at least the least we can do is to deprive this administration of such a claim. That has been our position since December 2017. And it's very clear. If you fail to convince your counterpart about your very basic and very minimal positions, your focus has to fall elsewhere. And it must fall elsewhere, my friends. And in this respect, I think the US administration underestimated the principled position of our leadership. Our basic position won't change. It cannot change. It was a strategic decision. As I said at the Middle East Institute last year, our position is written in stone because it was part of a greater picture. It involved everybody. And it was a strategic decision taken in 1988. It was a decision taken because we were promised by the US that a two-state solution based on international resolutions, on international framework, was the pragmatic and achievable aim. The administration also underestimated the Palestinian people, our people. It is worth here to point out that the Palestinians are, if anything, to the right of the leadership on the peace process. After all, they have lived through 27 years of a failed process that has not brought them what was promised them: statehood, freedom from occupation, peace, and therefore, the Palestinian people remain steadfast in pursuit of our rights. And the leadership is there, and the ambassadors are there, and our diplomatic mission are there as a first priority, to represent our people. So when Mr. Jared Kushner tried and failed to bypass the Palestinian leadership by appealing to the Palestinian public directly through publishing articles in Palestinian national newspapers like Al-Quds, that has ought to fail, in fact. And finally, the US underestimated the strength and resonance of the Palestinian issue among our fellow Arab countries, as well as international commitments to the international system. I mean, our decision to stand up to a hostile Trump administration is about holding not issues that has to do only with Palestine, but holding and upholding international law, international system, international order, and being committed to a two-state solution. So that position is widely shared. I assure you, that position of ours is widely shared. It is shared in the Arab world, as has been evidenced by two Arab summits only in the last few months, one in Saudi Arabia and the last month in Tunisia. Of course, two since the US Embassy announcement, and you have heard the King of Saudi Arabia in the summit in Saudi Arabia naming the summit of Jerusalem. And you may have read the absolute clear statement by the Arab Summit in Tunisia about Jerusalem, about the occupied territories, Arab territories, about the Arab Peace Initiative, and about to respect the international framework that is governing our issue. And it is also shared in Europe and the rest of the world, as you can see, both in recent statements by a significant number of current and former European leaders, as well as in resolutions and votes in the United Nations. I mean, I myself witnessed the vote against the Trump decision about Jerusalem in February last year in the UN chamber, in the UN General Assembly, and I saw the overwhelming majority of people, of countries, member states, who were not actually affected by the attempts at blackmailing them by the US ambassador to the UN at the time, Nikki Haley. It used to be shared also by previous US administrations. This very position of ours, this very policy of ours, used to be shared by all previous US administrations. This won't change. This will not change. Just because the Trump administration no longer feels bound by the framework of international law, nothing will change. And my friends here, we are where we are today. We realize that. And the question is where we go from here. And here, I'd like to engage you about some of the steps that we are taking to move us forward. We are not interested to move backward, and we do want, as Palestinians and the Palestinian leadership, to find the path forward, to find a way that we move ahead, and steps that at all times follow our conviction and commitment to international law and legitimacy in the pursuit of our people's legitimate rights. And before that, it might be useful to ask, what would make us re-engage with an American administration? I'm sure this is a question in the heads of many of our friends, many policy experts, many people who are specialized in our issue. What would make us re-engage? And here, this is an opportunity to be absolutely clear. The US remains an important player in this conflict. I mean, we are not blind. And of course, the US is an important player, but by tossing the international legitimacy out of the window, it has lost its leverage with us. It has lost its leverage with us. By closing our mission in Washington, by cutting all the funding to the Palestinian people and the Palestinian Authority, cutting all the funding to UNRWA, I mean, it has absolutely lost its status, its leverage, and the trust. Therefore, there are three red lines that it is an opportunity for us, the Palestinians, to actually outline. And these are red lines for us. They cannot be crossed. And no matter what administration, no matter what pressure, no matter what techniques, these red lines now will not be crossed. And since the administration appears to be fond absolutely fond of its own language. I will borrow some of their language. Number one red line, there can be no tampering with the US ultimate promise. And I'm using the word ultimate here just because they are fond of this word, ultimate promise. And that ultimate promise was issued to us, was given to us, which is a two-state solution. That was the US ultimate promise in the 70s and the 80s, particularly during the Reagan administration. That promise was very simple. In return, that was the promise. In return for us abandoning the political position of the PLO at the time, which was our position, our political platform was pursuing a single democratic state on all of the territory of historic Palestine. The US wanted us to abandon that political platform, wanted us to abandon that policy to the interest of actually having an international community, a US-led international community, help secure a two-state solution on the 1967 borders, where East Jerusalem would become the capital of the state of Palestine. And in that promise, there would be a just and agreed upon solution to the issue of refugees. And therefore, the PLO agreed. The PLO agreed to compromise in order to pursue that very promise. And the Palestinian leadership has since been committed to this compromise. I don't want to be too much fond of their language, but that was the ultimate compromise from the Palestinians. If we are talking about ultimates now, that was exactly the ultimate compromise by the Palestinians. And the fact that for 30 years, the Palestinian side has been willing and able to sustain our commitments under this compromise and under our commitments to signed agreements like Oslo and others, in spite of everything that has been happening. And you know, there has been much happening during these years. The illegal settlement expansion, with every brick there was waning and erosion of the two-state solution. Despite all that, we just showed how serious we are in keeping our commitment to the vision, i.e. the promise, and to our own commitment under the Oslo Accords. But rather than engage seriously with the issues underlying this promise, I mean here the Trump administration, rather than engaging with the issues, this administration has been engaged in a systematic attempt at removing them from the table. I mean, it's like a sleight of hand, if you know what I mean. It is a sleight of hand. You know, defund UNRWA and redefine who can be called a refugee. You know, like a magician, like an amateur magician, if I use this metaphor. I mean, hey presto, gone are 6 million refugees whose rights need to be respected. Then move the US embassy and call Jerusalem Israel's capital. Abracadabra, gone are almost 500,000 Palestinians in Jerusalem, and any argument over the city's status. I mean, almost 500,000 who own every home in East Jerusalem, every shop, every church, every mosque. They're gone. They're no longer there. We can't see them. And then recognize Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, and hocus pocus, gone is the illegal occupation. You know, now the State Department doesn't say occupation about the occupied territories. So it's a hocus pocus, the card is gone. The occupation is gone. And the 5 million people under a military occupation for 52 years do not exist. They have gone somewhere in this game of illusion. And then put some money on the table for economic incentives. The Trump team would come and tell us, you know, I don't know if I remember as a child all the tricks by magicians like, you know, Zem Zalabem, bye-bye statehood, bye-bye sovereignty, bye-bye two-state solution. I mean these, my friends, and let me be absolutely straightforward without having to mince my words or even be very diplomatic. These are just cheap tricks. They're just tricks. They're magicking their way around the issues because they don't want to deal with them. And like all stage magic, nothing has actually disappeared. Nothing has disappeared. Things have just been shuffled around, you know, to make you feel that, and while you are distracted. And we believe this whole ultimate deal and the offering of the ultimate deal is the distraction, is the right hand for, having us focus there, but the left hand is doing all this reshuffling. But none of these issues have disappeared. And, you know, while our attention may have been diverted here or there, but the issues remain. And so do the possible solutions. And as a result, what we need to, the US administration, any US administration to do, is to convince us they are serious about finding a solution. That is the simple equation for us. We're not interested in games anymore. These are simple, cheap games. And you know what? And also stop messing with your promise. Stop messing with your promise. We have delivered our own commitments, our own compromise. You cannot renege on your promise. And stop tampering with the framework for that promise. It's as simple, as crude as that. And the promise is clear. 2 states according to international law and legitimacy. According to international law and legitimacy. According to resolutions that were sponsored and voted by the US. And it means that the Israeli occupied territory is just that. It's a temporarily occupied in contravention of international law. And as a consequence, continued Israel control over that territory. All that territory, including East Jerusalem, is illegal. And a US administration that wishes to be taken seriously on this conflict needs to walk back the steps that this administration has taken as a starting point. And then it must clearly and unambiguously state its commitment to the international framework, the international resolutions, and to the principle of the 2-state solution and a just solution to the issue of refugees. Only then can the US become part of the solution again, because for us, the US now is only part of the problem. Number 2, and we have learned our lesson very, very carefully in the last 27 years, there can be no veering from international framework and international peacemaking. I mean, if the first red line was about the goal, the promise, the second is about the process. It is about the process. We are calling for and have been engaged in an effort to internationalize the issue, internationalize peacemaking on our conflict as well. It is abundantly clear now that the US cannot do it alone. It cannot do it alone. Israel is not a foreign policy issue in the United States of America. I have come to learn through my own experiences, Israel is a domestic issue in America, and nothing is a better example than the current administration and the current state of affairs. And the process we have seen so far with the US as a sole arbitrator has absolutely failed. And we believe a multilateral process stands a much better chance. It would secure broad acceptance and would include broad guarantees for its implementation for everybody involved, not only for us, for Israel, for the region. What other international conflicts has been solved without international mediations? I'm asking. Do we have any other international conflict that has been solved without international mediation, from South Africa to East Timor to the Balkans? Name it. International mediation was the prime factor behind conflict resolution. We were made the exception, and now this is a red line. We will not accept to be made the exception. And we strongly believe that the post-World War II order that this administration is doing so much to undermine is too important for too many to be sacrificed only for the sake of the Netanyahu re-election campaign. I mean, this world order was not established for Palestine. It was established at the wreckage of the Second World War because of the horrors that happened in the continent I am in now, Europe, because of the horrors of the Holocaust and the horrors of Hiroshima and the never again. And yes, we will abide by the never again, and we will protect the never again. And we believe that by moving away from international legitimacy on Israel, let me just point out that not one of America's allies, not one of our allies in America, nor anyone in the Arab world has accepted the Trump recognition of the Golan annexation. This administration is simply operating in a vacuum worldwide. We believe that we have global consensus behind us in this regard. Look at UNRWA, for instance. The US defunding UNRWA only doubled international support to UNRWA, doubled. And luckily, thankfully to our international partners, UNRWA's budget is now up and running. Schools are operating because of the generous support. And why? Because the world and countries like the UK, where I am, France, Germany, and beyond this has stepped in. Japan, Italy, name them. Everybody stepped in to preserve international institutions, international legitimacy, international order. Saudi Arabia just sent us a check for $40 million to uphold our ability to sustain because of the withholding of our funds by the Netanyahu government. So number 2 of our red lines, we want to see a real multilateral process in the peacemaking. And number 3, we cannot accept political and financial, or for that matter, legal That's why I'm not with you. Legal blackmail. This is unacceptable. They have been trying it from day one, and they are not getting the message. It's not acceptable. It doesn't work, because our office in Washington, our budget for the Palestinian Authority, the entire Palestinian Authority is a tool. It's a tool. It's a mean. And if that mean contradicts with our goal, we don't think twice. We're clear. And the US has closed the PLO mission in Washington. It has defunded UNRWA, as I just mentioned, laws right, left, and center in the Congress targeting the financial assistance to the Palestinian people and the Palestinian Authority. Like, if you remember, the Taylor Force Act, which just was being tabled as I arrived, among others, of course. And all of these laws are being signed into law by the administration. These are all attempts at pressuring the Palestinian side. They are all attempts at forcing change on us, forcing change. And we are asking, we're really asking, what kind of change are they forcing on us? What do they want? Seriously, what do they want? We are not going to walk away from the real issues that we need to solve. I mean, these are our people. I mean, where are we going to go? Giving up the rights of our refugees, for instance? You know, this is the issue, the essence, the very foundation stone of the conflict, telling us how to spend our social security on families, on children and women, because their breadwinner has been killed or rounded, regardless. Telling us that hundreds of thousands of people should be just left alone in the streets. No. We are not going to accept to whom we provide and how we manage our affairs. We want to run our affairs by ourselves, and we will not accept managing our affairs by a remote control from Tel Aviv or from Washington, for that matter. Either Tel Aviv takes over all of its responsibility, and under international law, it is the responsibility of the occupying power to provide for the people, or they better leave us alone to manage our own affairs, because we know our affairs much better. Do we live up to our commitments under signed agreements with Israel and the international law? That is a question. Do we live up to our commitments under signed agreements with Israel and international law? Yes. Yes, we do. And we have done so consistently and transparently. And the Palestinian Authority was set up to do exactly this. It was a tool in the pursuit of the two-state solution. And my friends, everything we have done as the Palestinian Authority or the PLO is aimed at just one thing: achieving statehood and securing our people's legitimate rights in line with international resolutions, international consensus, international law. And last year, we reconvened the Palestinian National Council, the highest entity of the PLO, for the first time in 22 years. And by the way, that was meant and very important juncture in our history to convene the PNC for the first time in 22 years. Because this resulted in the reselection of the Central Council, the PLO's supreme decision-making body, which is the Central Council, specifically in order to prepare for possible national strategic decisions that only this body is empowered to make. The Central Council was the body that created the Palestinian Authority, by the way. The Central Council was the body that created the Palestinian Authority. It is the Central Council that can end it. So we are also preparing for all eventualities. While we are set on our commitments, set on our goals, set on our compromise, we have got to prepare for all eventualities. And the new government has just been sworn in, as you know. It has two overriding priorities. Number one priority for this government, headed by Dr. Mohammed Shtay, is to achieve reconciliation with Hamas in Gaza and prepare for new national elections. The divide with Gaza is a major self-inflicting wound. It is one we have to deal with, and it remains our highest domestic political priority. And this government is not a technocratic government like previous ones. Why? Because now is not a time for technocrats. It is a time for political leaders with local constituencies and the ability to guide and mobilize people. We realize that we are at a strategic juncture. And this is part of an ongoing effort to support a program on our side, a program of peaceful popular resistance to Israel's occupation. And you see it everywhere. You know, people are very creative. When the state of affairs, the military occupation, end up fragmenting them, a group in Gaza, a group in East Jerusalem, a group in the West Bank, a group outside, they also come up with creative ways to localize their resistance. You see it. We see popular resistance play out every day, every week, and in every part of the occupied territories, from the simple act of it. Also, by the way, this is not just about taking off to the streets peacefully, demonstrating like happened in Jerusalem last year, and challenging the Netanyahu decision for erecting electric gate and winning that battle, the people in Jerusalem, our people in Jerusalem, and using the mattress prayer as a method of resistance. But it's happening in Bilain, Na'lin, Kafr Kaddoum in the West Bank, protesting the settlements. It's happening on a weekly basis in Gaza for people who are absolutely fed up with this state of cage. They are in the biggest cage they are in for 12 years. That is putting them at the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. But also, my friends, popular resistance is not just such acts, important they are. It is also about surviving, this is not a small measure. It's about educating our children. It's about building our institutions. It's about praying in our holy sites. All this is popular resistance, and it's not to a small measure. You mean we seriously? People are asking, what do you mean by popular resistance? I mean by popular resistance is when Palestinian mothers on a morningly basis, if I may use that term, have to take a decision: should they send their kids to school or not? Because they have to go through checkpoints for soldiers who are not answerable to our law, for settlers who are answerable to a different law. And yet we have one of the lowest illiteracy rate worldwide and the highest PhD per capita worldwide. And yes, this might sound in a way rhetorical. No, it's not. The sheer pressure on us as a nation requires us to double the efforts to actually sustain. And this is a key strategic issue. We're going nowhere. All these cards they're trying to have, the delusional game. We're going nowhere. The 5 million under occupation are there. The 6 million refugees are there. The 2 million people in Gaza are there. And popular resistance is the purest expression of our people's will. It is. And finally, in this regard, we will continue to use the avenues of the international system to put pressure on Israel, because this is a major point. It's a major strategic shift that we did in 2011. Why? I'll tell you why. Because Israel profits from its occupation. It's as simple as that. Not only it's a comfortable situation, it's a profitable situation. And nothing would justify or qualify this point more than the elections last week. The Israeli public is so comfortable, so comfortable. It is not Netanyahu pushing them in that direction. It is Netanyahu being rewarded by a comfortable society. Rewarded, and by the way, the last minute promise to annex the West Bank, to annex settlements in the West Bank might be the factor that made it for him to win that slight majority. So the occupation profits handsomely. It profits directly from the land, more than 60% of the West Bank, in the form of agriculture. Go to the Jordan Valley, I'm sure many of you have been. Mining our phosphate in the Dead Sea, or the water resources. It profits indirectly from a system of occupation that has us pay fees to our occupier. We pay fees to our occupier. That has us provide security for the occupier. It profits from a captive market. Our market is almost the same size in terms of population as the Israeli market. And we are absolutely captive. So the imports that come has to come through Israeli ports, mostly through Israeli companies. And guess where the tax go? The import tax, it goes to the Israeli budget, not to the Palestinian Authority budget. Some estimates is that we lose $350 million more than the US pays for us in the previous years. $350 million only in loss of tax revenues. This must end. It must end. And Israel must pay a price for its occupation. Otherwise, do not expect a change. If we are serious about a bloodless, peaceful change, it has got to be hitting the occupation in its pocket. And our status, and by the way, before I go on, even many Israeli studies and international studies about settlers in the West Bank, and I was sure of the results, but I would always follow these studies. More than 70% of these settlers answer the question, why are you there? They would say for economic reasons. Of course, for economic reasons, because the same villa with the swimming pool in Tel Aviv or anywhere else would be triple or maybe quadruple the price of an exempted sort of property in the occupied West Bank. So that's why we are focusing on our status in the UN. That opens for us many such possibilities, from the International Criminal Court to demanding the publication of the list the blacklist of Israeli and international businesses that operate in occupied territory that the UN, by the way, compiled in 2018, last year. We believe its publication is essential, and we will keep pushing in that direction. And believe you me, we have international partners in this regard. And if businesses must be named and shamed for colluding with an illegal military occupation. And the settlements are, as you know, in contravention of international law, a war crime, and their products, all of their products must be banned, and the businesses operating in them must be sanctioned. And therefore, our strategy is aiming at ending the occupation must target the economic interest that sustains it. And the Trump administration has at every turn tried to block our efforts in the international arena. Fine, they're blocking everything, but in fact, all it is succeeding in doing is abdicating America's role on the world stage as far as ours is concerned. But that abdicating America's role is a Trump's business. Our business is Palestine, and in Palestine, the issue remains, the issues remain the same. The goal remains the same. And my friends, times are changing. And for this, we must credit the Trump administration as well for giving us these changes. The actions have widened, the Trump actions have widened the debate around Palestine, on Palestine. It has sharpened minds, and we are following. For the first time, we see issues that were hitherto taboo among Washington policy-making circles being raised in the U.S. Congress, issues like the U.S. aid and military aid to Israel. The comparison made between Netanyahu and the rise of right-wing authoritarian regimes around the world, the growing debate about Palestine on U.S. campuses across the U.S., the transformational change among the Jewish community in the U.S. I had the privilege of addressing key leaders of the J Street movement, of the Reform rabbis only last week, and I could see how much the community is also clinching to the Jewish values itself, and where are we going with all this? So this all opens up new opportunities, new possibilities, new engagements, new alliances, and it is time that we say out loud what for so long has only been whispered. This is the time that we say it very loud, that if you want to have a resolution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the answer is not to pressure and blackmail us, the victims. Khalas. Khalas in Arabic means enough. You have been pressuring us for 27 years. And every time you want to deal with Israel, you give more incentives, hoping that you will only slow down the illegal activities like the settlements. After all, punishing us will not get anywhere. The US has tried this for a long time, and it's trying this much more intensively now. It's not going to go anywhere. And the answer is really to use leverage with the occupier. If you really, and this is a simple point, want to change the dynamics, and this is our strategy. No amount of rebranding will magic away the underlying issues to our conflict. The Palestinian leadership has taken a stand for the international order. We are pushing back against the Trump administration, not because it is the Trump administration, by the way, but because it wants to undermine the two-state solution, and with it, international legitimacy and international legality. Our conflict is an international conflict, and it demands an international solution. We will continue to remind the world that the alternative to the two-state solution is not the status quo. It is not the status quo. The alternative to the two-state solution is a full-fledged apartheid and violent occupation that is unfolding right before our eyes. Today, as you all know, there are 3 different legal systems in the area of historic Palestine, all operated by Israel. One for Israeli Jews, and one different for Palestinian citizens of Israel, and the third for the Palestinians in the occupied territories. I mean, there is one word in Afrikaans for this, it's apartheid. And for the Palestinians in the occupied territories, this is the very essence of where we're going, and we are living it on a daily basis. Not to mention the nation-state law that specifically excluded the Palestinian citizens of Israel from being equal citizens, and that the right of self-determination is exclusive to Israeli Jews. And this is the system that will continue. And if we abandon the two-state solution, if we abandon our commitments, and this is why we're saying we're just changing our course. we're changing our strategy. And we are committed to our people's legitimate rights. And we believe the best way to achieve those is through the popular peaceful struggle that, some of you might ask when it will become mass, a struggle everywhere. No, it's a matter of when, not if. But the struggle that is happening now is also very important. And we need to make full use of the international system and the implementation of international law for both peacemaking and accountability. And I stress accountability. Even if we have such resistance from Israel, such blockage from the US, we will continue pushing forward, pushing ahead, and we are not giving up. As the title of my talk, we are not giving up on peace. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Ambassador Zomlot. So I'm going to lead off very quickly with, I have two questions, and then we're going to hand it off to the audience, and I'm sure they will have many more. One of the questions we hear a lot here in Washington, which I hear, is the Palestinians are making a mistake by rejecting the Trump plan out of hand before they've seen it. Can you address that question? Because there's a lot packed into it.
How can we reject something we have never seen? I mean, all what we are seeing are adverse steps that are all tailored to actually define our situation exactly the way Netanyahu sees it. From the day one, closing our mission was primarily to de-recognize and denationalize the Palestinian issue, because of the Palestinian flag in Washington, with a Palestinian ambassador representing a collective rights, must end. This was not, about some just political disagreement. It was strategic. And then every single act that followed, I mean, as I said, we can cross the T's and dot the I's. Every single step that followed are in line with the following strategic aims that, in our opinion, is the aim of this so-called ultimate deal. First is what I just mentioned, the denationalization and de-recognition of the Palestinian cause, issue, and leadership. Number two is the de-internationalization of the Palestinian issue. I mean, go back to the last 2 years. I mean, Nikki Haley's prime task was to dismantle international framework when it comes to Palestine. Dismantle it in every sense. We join UNESCO, the US withdraws. We join the UN, we seek the UN Human Rights Council, the US withdraws, and what have you. The US provokes the visa, or revokes the visa, I should have said, of the ICC prosecutor only last week. So it is the de-internationalization of the issue. Thirdly, it is actually the alteration of the nature, the identity, the definition of the conflict. They want to change it from Arab-Israeli conflict. That's why you have Warsaw and all these. From Arab-Israeli conflict, not even to Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Now they want to change it to an internal affair within Israel. And that exactly explains the Consulate General situation and how they relocated it and how they renamed it into Palestinian affairs. So this question, regardless of what they're going to come up with, I mean, the message is clear, the acts are clear, absolutely clear. They do not need second guess. This administration has simply co-opted the Netanyahu worldview of the conflict, and in fact, the chief member of the Trump team is Netanyahu himself.
Thank you. The other question I want to ask, the word that is on everyone's lips today, whether you like it or dislike it, is the word annexation. There's a lot of statements by well-intentioned members of Congress and groups that have in the past not wanted to speak out on settlements, who are now saying, no, this is a line. If Israel annexes it, will be terrible. It shouldn't do it. But on the ground, there has been de facto annexation proceeding for years, with really nothing to stop it. And my question for you is, if in the coming period, Israel does move from de facto annexation to de jure annexation, what will the response of the PLO be? Since there's not been a good response to de facto, will there be new responses available if it moves to de jure?
There is nothing, if I may, Lara, there is nothing called de jure annexation. I mean, Israel is an occupying force. That's not according to my law or our law. It's according to the international law. It's an occupying force of all the territory that it captured in 1967. As such, de facto annexation, de jure annexation are illegitimate, not recognized. And therefore, by the way, as you know, Israel annexed East Jerusalem in the 80s, and it annexed the Golan Heights also in the 80s, but its annexation of these occupied territories was never recognized by any party in the international community, including the US, until President Trump did the unthinkable of recognizing the annexation of the Golan Heights. Having said that, of course, Israel is not answerable to anything. We are. We are. And I tried to say in my introductory remarks, we are answerable to two things, our people and the international legitimacy. And we mean it, by the way, we do mean it, because we know that without this, there is no hope. There is no hope. And if we are answerable to the international order system, then this is what we care about. We consider the Trump act of recognizing the Golan Heights, and perhaps we don't know if he would actually recognize any annexation in the West Bank, which would be lethal, absolutely lethal. But our main concern is how the international community is going to be dealing with this. The red line here, if the international system, the international law would change. If it changed, that's a red line. That's the end of the two-state solution, absolutely, immediately. And, if I may want to qualify my argument, we don't see much difference now between what Netanyahu is doing and what the administration is doing. Unfortunately, they are becoming identical in the arena of the illegal settlements. And therefore, we see them primarily in the arena of unilateralism, illegality, and isolated. Now, this is the last word is very important. So long as they continue to be isolated, we will press ahead. We will press ahead. But the moment they are not isolated, and the moment they find their way to break the international consensus, we will have much to think about and much to reorient in terms of our strategy and goals.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to open up to questions. There is a microphone in the back. Raise your hand if you have a question. We ask that it be in the form of a question, not a long statement. I think while people are getting together, I'm going to ask you another question. Actually, it's the question I meant to start with. When you and I were discussing pulling this event together and talking about a name for it, and you wanted something in the name about not giving up on peace and that idea, can you talk to us a little bit about what that means? There are narratives that are gaining ground that, look, the Palestinians never wanted peace, so whatever Israel does, it has to do, and it's sort of rewriting of history in terms of what has been the PLO position from before the peace process and through the Oslo process. So today, April 2019, when you say that you're not giving up on peace and you're speaking as a senior official in the PLO, talk about that a little bit.
Because you need to judge any party by deeds, not by words, Lara and our good friends in the audience, and by action. We are hearing enough lip service about the two-state solution, about peace from many quarters, particularly from Israel for a long time, and then from the US. The two-state solution, a solution based on the two-state solution on the basis of international resolutions, is an absolute, genuine, everlasting, solid commitment on our part, because we believe that international legitimacy was not born out of nothing, and we also believe international equilibrium is not created out of nothing. We know why the world pressured us to accept the two-state solution, because the one-state, equal rights, one person, one vote formula will not be a starter. It's a non-starter. And therefore, the two-state solution seemed to the world to be the most practical, the most pragmatic. Now, that we are committed to, simply because the dividing line now, Lara, is not between Israelis and Palestinians, or Muslims and Jews, or all these false dividing lines. In fact, we see more and more members of the Jewish communities worldwide, and even in Israel, questioning where things are heading and partnering with our main logic The real dividing line is between solutionist and non-solutionist. That's the dividing line. And we believe Netanyahu is definitely in the second quarter. He is in the non-solutionist. He thinks he can manage this situation permanently. He can sell to some success, I must admit, to the Israeli public that this could be of zero cost and actually of much more benefits and profits. He can even forge relationships with the Arab world. You have heard him a couple of days ago saying that he was called by many Arab leaders to congratulate him, and some of our leaders challenge him to name one. But nonetheless, he is definitely in trying to convince the public in Israel, the US administration, that this conflict will be either managed or bought off by some economic incentives. We are solutionists. We are oriented towards a solution. And as such, we have been confronted with a very severe choice in December 2017. I mean, you have the US president, the sole arbitrator, the sole sponsor, the guarantor of the peace process. We started the peace process in Madrid before Oslo because of a letter we received from Secretary of State then, James Baker, the Bush senior administration. And the letter of guarantees mentions first line, as you know, Lara, resolutions 242, 338, land for peace, the withdrawal of occupied territories. So that moment of Trump destroying all that was a difficult moment. And then we had two choices, just to answer your question. And I was party to that discussion, Lara. The two choices is, number one choice, we sink the boat. If the Palestinians were interested to sink the boat, as some Israeli propagandists say, that would have been our perfect moment. And no one can dare blame us. You know, you have the US president who is reneging on written commitments, reneging on international law, reneging on 25 years of hard investment by the US and the rest of the international community. If we needed justification, if we needed explanation, that would have been the right moment to sink the boat and to just throw all the cards in the air and let them fall where they may. And by the way, some of us were thinking about it. Some of us were thinking about it. This is the opportunity. I mean, this is their fault, not our fault. In that moment also, we could have just said a simple sentence. Okay, that's it. Goodbye. Goodbye two-state solution. Goodbye Oslo. Goodbye Palestinian Authority. You know what? Let the occupation come and take over. Take over. You are in control of the land, in control of the seas, in control of the borders, in control of the waters, in control of everything. The only thing you have not taken, because you have taken everything else, is the people. It's your responsibility. And the second choice was to ever more recommit and double our commitments to the vision, to the two-state solution, and to our commitments and investments on the ground, which is, you know, the institutions of the Palestinian Authority, the nucleus of the state, our ability to keep relative stability, ironically, despite all the odds, and only change our strategy. Keep our goals, keep our commitment. We picked the second. Our president was absolutely clear. We go for the second. We keep the commitment to the two-state solution firmly. In fact, go back to all the last few years, particularly the last 2 years during the confrontations with the president, with the Trump administration. You will see every act we have done in the international arena, in the Arab arena, in the national arena of Palestine, every single act, from the convening of the National Council to the convening of the Security Council at our request, or the General Assembly, or the Arab summits, all were primarily to reaffirm the two-state solution and our vision, all through the years. So we take the opportunity of the attack on the goal to reaffirm the goal. And then we don't allow for our commitment to slip away, because we don't want, Lara and our friends, the curse of blood as happened in the second intifada. We know that we must keep the vision above our head, even if we are not yet successful. And we must also keep our feet on the ground, We don't want to jump anywhere, and keep walking, even if some are pulling you backward. Keep walking, because we still believe that the majority of the people in Israel, in Palestine, and everywhere else believe that the two-state solution remains to be possible. So at this point in time, I'm sorry, I would not accept the accusation that the Palestinians are not serious about the two-state solution. I think it would not have been more clear than the last couple of years.
Thank you. All right, we have one, hold on a second, let's go up to the microphone. We have several questions. Don't be timid. Introduce yourself when you ask.
Hi, Ambassador Zomlot. I'm Deborah Shushan from Americans for Peace Now. Of course, I had the opportunity to meet you when you were here in Washington. And it's a shame that you're not here anymore. And of course, the broader issue of the complete delegitimization of the Palestinian national movement, which is a much broader issue. So I have a few questions, but one question is, I'm very happy to hear your discussion talking about connections with American Jews and American Jewish groups. I know this is something that you emphasized when you were here in Washington. And so one question that I have is, now that it's obviously much more difficult to pursue and cultivate the kind of ties and relationships that you were pursuing when you were here in Washington, how can we continue that work together in the absence of the PLO mission? And my second question has to do with the ultimate deal. Obviously, the Palestinians are being put in a lose-lose position, being presented, obviously, with a deal that, as you said, we've already seen it. We can cross the T's and dot the I's. That will be absolutely unacceptable. So you lose if you engage with it, and you lose, obviously, if you don't engage with it, because you'll be blamed for being rejectionists. So how do you prepare for the day after and for being blamed for rejecting what is obviously going to be a terrible plan?
Well, hello, Deborah. I miss you. And I also regret not being there physically. But answering your first question, as I said, as I tried to say, with every crisis comes an opportunity. And, the closure of the PLO mission in Washington has just doubled our resolve to engage the American public, the American people. We make the absolute clear distinction between the administration, the Trump administration, and America. And it's clear, it's abundantly clear for us, that distinction. I mean, we are following the exciting discussion. And that's exactly why I immediately accepted your invitation here. And before it, at the Harvard Kennedy School, I was supposed to give a keynote speech at the University of Chicago, the annual lecture of the university, and many other places, the J Street and the Reform Movement. I was supposed to be in person, but let's not get there. But I did witness in the last few days, when I am engaging all these constituencies, how much people are much more eager to engage, to understand, much more mobilized. So this is a very interesting moment for us to engage. And the question is, the lack of our presence directly in Washington, I have to say, Deborah, it puts much more pressure on you, on our friends, on our allies, on the allies of peace. And I know we have many institutions, many foundations, many groups, many people who would want to take that up. I mean, I found myself saying in the Palestine Center, a few days ago, I was speaking at the Palestine Center, the Jerusalem Fund in Washington, saying, okay, fine. I said this last time I spoke here in person, that should they close the mission, and we expect them to do so, should they close the mission, should I leave the US, places like the Palestine Center would carry the voice and would continue the discussion. And there are so many of these institutions. There are so many changes that are, frankly, go beyond us as a PLO. The Palestinian community is coming of age, it's maturing, and it's now the third, the fourth generations who are really engaging in the political sphere, like Rashida Tlaib and like others. But that's a very important phenomenon. They are coming together. They are way more in the political arena rather than just the charity, as historically has been the case. I mean, the Jewish community is a transformative change, not pro-Palestine or against Israel, or transformative change of discovering reality and of finding out. And the discussion last week with key leaders of the Jewish community reveals to me as a person that the main dividing line here for all these progressive, and not But by the way, this is not just about left. It's also mainstream. I mean, the reform movement consists of 2 million American Jews. 2 million. That's 1/3. It's primarily about the ethnic or ethic. I think after I finished that very inspiring conversation online, it was ethnic or ethic or ethical. I think the values of the mainstream Jewish community is much more in the ethical side, absolutely in the ethics side. When you have too much of ethnicity, when you have too much of ultra nationalism, when you go as far as Netanyahu and all those, I think you will have what you are having right now. And not to go much more, and you know better than I do, but I am absolutely following what is happening because my heart is still where you are, Deborah, by the way. Following the discussion in the Congress. No, it's big. It's big. It's big that the majority of the 2020 Democratic candidates did not go to AIPAC. It's big. It's a message. It's a major message. It's big that they allowed for a discussion when Ilhan Omar was ostracized, and they condemned all forms of racism and hatred, including anti-Semitism, of course. It's very serious that some are now suggesting openly that we must revisit our incentives to Israel in light of the situation. And I'm not saying that this is going to yield results immediately, but the trajectory of things vis-a-vis the US public is definitely not going the Netanyahu way. And by way of closing this, I myself and all of my colleagues back home, and by the way, as a result, we have decided to increase our people to people in the absence of government to government, and this is not going to be the case for some time. In the absence of that, people to people relationship, churches, universities, municipalities, and what have you. And we have a program to actually push that, support that, but also to reach out through you and via you, Deborah, to continue the work. Now, and finally, the ultimate deal is a lose-lose. Lose if we engage, lose if we don't engage. This is a very interesting question, and actually this is the question in our head. It is the question in our head from day one, by the way, from day one. But sometimes, Deborah, this is not about the choice between the good and the bad. The choice between the bad and the worse. The bad and the worse. The bad is not to engage. The worse is to engage, because I'll be very straightforward here. This administration just wants to touch us, and they will not. They will not. To argue the case for all the people who are having our back, who are supporting us, the Arab world, the international community, and name it. What, you want to be more Catholic than the Pope? Here are the Palestinians. So the cost of not engaging is high, but the cost of engaging is higher, Deborah, and we have made up our minds. We have nothing to do with this administration. Mark my word.
All right, so I think we're heading towards the end. We were trying to wrap this up at 11:45. I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you all for coming, and Ambassador Zomlot, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. It's good to see your face and hear your voice, and we hope to have you in person next time, inshallah, if the stars align. So thank you very much.